Hi everyone, today I'm thrilled to introduce Rayann Sprenkle. Rayann holds a Bachelor's of Science in Exercise Physiology. She has 9 years of experience as an exercise scientist in the CrossFit world. She's a phenomenal athlete herself and has worked one-on-one with Division I collegiate athletes and weekend warriors alike, including women who are pregnant. For anyone who has questions about fitness during pregnancy, this conversation is one that you definitely want to tune into. Rayann is a huge source of wisdom and insight when it comes to safely meeting your fitness goals during pregnancy, and she absolutely leads by example. Rayann, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. I feel like I'm probably ready in the introduction though. Thank you.
Oh, it's all true. All true. So, Rayann, you have a beautiful daughter, Sylvia, and you have a baby on the way, right?
I do. Yeah, you probably can't see it from the we got
Yeah.
we got lots of baby going on here.
Sweet. Yeah, so we had to do this call like pretty soon because you're due in like 2 weeks or something, right?
Yep, 2 weeks or less.
Oh my
She's ready
gosh.
to go. We just went for an ultrasound the other day. She's measuring a week ahead, so could be literally any time. She's in the correct spot, the right direction, engaged and ready to go. We'll see.
Yeah, so she's ready to meet the world.
Mhm.
Awesome. Oh, very cool. So let's go ahead and start. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your background and how you got into lifting. I know you told me over the phone that you have a crazy backstory about how you got into lifting.
Yeah, so I actually right around 2010, I got into a pretty bad car accident on my way to work. At the time, I had been racing cross country mountain bike, and it was, I'd say, probably about 5 years into it. I was sponsored, I had a team. It was something that I was extremely passionate about, wanted to do for the rest of my life. I thought that I was going to go a little bit bigger with it. And when I got into my car accident, I actually almost completely split my liver in half.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, but yeah, I ended up in the hospital for quite a long time, and I had they said about a 50% chance recovery rate. And I was in intensive care for a while. When I left intensive care and started rehab, that was about like two weeks before I was allowed to go home. And then once I was allowed to go home, it took about a year to recover after that. I was in a wheelchair. I had to in order for me to go upstairs and take a bath, I had to crawl up our stairs.
Oh my
Because
gosh.
I had to relearn how to walk because a lot of my organs and stuff in my system were failing because obviously it's supported all by your liver. Um, and after that point in time, my only thought was to get back into biking. My brain was on it. I went back to school about a year and a half after my car accident, and I actually went just for straight health sciences. I wanted to do radiography at the time, and get back into biking. I had been very adamant about recovering quickly, and I just couldn't find anything for me that helped, that stuck, that I felt like was progressing me quick enough. I was living in Michigan for a while, and I came back to Pennsylvania to finish my degree at Penn College. When I was at Penn College, one of my friends went on a run with me, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to try CrossFit?" And I was like, "What is CrossFit?" I have no idea what that is. He's like, you're gonna really love it. He's like, it's very intense, and he's like, he goes, "I know how you are with things." And he's like, "Just trust me on this one." So I tried CrossFit. I fell in love with CrossFit, and it sort of changed the whole path of my life. I was in a seated major. I was very close to finishing almost. I had one summer rotation left for clinicals, and I completely left the major. I went over to exercise science. I started coaching classes. I started getting really involved with a gym that I helped extensively with after about a year. And it sort of sprouted off into all of these other different paths for me, getting more involved with the strength and conditioning portion of things, or specialty classes, And it just kind of jump-started my direction into the whole health science and fitness world. I decided to continue to stick with it. And then I got so into CrossFit, I wanted to start competing. I competed locally for a long time. And I started competing at a higher level around like 2013 or 2014. And then went for my bachelor's degree for exercise science. And that's kind of how everything kind of snowballed. And then everything else just kind of fit around that. I did my internship at Bucknell. I had quite a few mentors along the way. I got to meet some extremely amazing people on my fitness journey and talk to them and pick their brains. Some Olympic lifting coaches, some really good CrossFit coaches that used to be like coaches for Olympians and stuff like that. So, I mean, it really did branch everything out for me.
That's amazing. That is a absolutely amazing story. And
That's
I think, yeah, yeah, my mind is blown. But that's amazing because I think so many times we ask people like, well, what's your why? What's your why for doing what you do? And your why is so solid. Like you see how fitness and CrossFit has influenced your life and literally got you like back onto your feet and, you know, back into like living. And like, that's awesome that you have that why, that solid foundation that you can pass on to others and encourage them to, you know, encourage them in their fitness journeys as well. That's incredible. So, yeah. So tell me a little bit, because you are very pregnant right now. So tell me a little bit about your experience continuing your high level of training during your pregnancy. What's that looked like?
So the first time around, like my very first pregnancy that I had, I actually was not doing CrossFit more than 2 years, I believe. And so for me, I mean, that's considered a new lifter. That's considered a brand new, like you're still brand new after 2 years. Have not learned that much yet. And I actually had a specialist when I had Sylvia. So I had a specialist and I had somebody who was programming for me at the time. I reached out to somebody who I knew at the time was working with women who were pregnant who specifically did Olympic lifting and were prior CrossFit like regional athletes. So I reached out to him and I had him write me programming, and then I did work with a specialist in sports medicine at Geisinger alongside my OB and my midwife. And it was a huge advantage to have somebody programming for me because it kind of took my brain out of having to wonder if what I was doing was right. And because he had worked with people who were close to what I was at the time, I felt comfortable with him programming for me and me following it without questioning it. Mm-hmm. My specialist kind of helped me figure out what was going to be sustainable for me as far as movements, the types of movements that I could do, and where I could take my body. And then my midwife was fantastic because, as you know, like midwives are extremely hands-on. So she was able to really be hands-on with me and actually check structures, make sure everything was okay, check diastasis, all those kinds of things for me. If there were ever any issues or any problems, she said, I'm really glad that you're being honest with me. I'm glad that you're telling me, you know, you're doing A, B, and C lifting wise. And she's like, I just need you to always be honest and always tell me what's going on. And, you know, we can make sure that we get through this in the healthiest way possible. And of course, you know, I have an OB just for delivery purposes. Mm-hmm. But where was I going with this?
Yeah, so it sounds like you had a solid team, which is so important. Like so much support, so many people pouring into your life, and that's awesome. So how has your training and your lifting changed, modified during pregnancy? What's that look like now?
So one of the biggest things that changed for me the very first time around was learning how to modify my weights, and learning how to listen to my body and what was correct for me and what was not correct. This time around is much more of an exact science. I did not have that the first time around. It was kind of like wing it and we figure out what we can do or how heavy we can go. But what I found out from my first pregnancy into this pregnancy was my max weights were around, if I took about 20% off of my max weights and worked my percentages off of 80% of my max, I was generally good, which makes sense because
Yeah.
you're thinking for most of those lifts you have towards the end of your pregnancy, you're going to have probably about an extra 25 pounds of pressure directly on your pelvis. So for most of those things, I think backing off that and knowing your exact numbers going into it was extremely helpful. Another thing was that I was very highly active or an athlete prior to my first pregnancy. And then going into my second pregnancy, I very obviously had been lifting for 7+ years, plus my athlete background.
Yeah.
So that allowed me to do a lot of different things while I was pregnant. But I definitely think that women should not be afraid of being able to lift or being able to do things while they're pregnant. They need the right team. They need a good understanding of what's going on. So hiring somebody, a professional, is extremely important. And then having somebody not only prior to giving birth, but somebody that's there prior to giving birth and afterwards. Because I think that rehabilitation, yes, Julia, so you should be a key essential person in recovery without a doubt. And not just somebody who's a physical therapist, but somebody who specializes in pelvic health or somebody who specializes in that specifically.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're working out or you're not working out, you're going to end up having some kind of alignment problem or some kind of issue after you're pregnant, and you might not even know it. I mean, I've corrected so many women's hips after pregnancy, and they had not done any working out at all.
Yeah. Yeah, which is crazy because really, I mean, you said a lot of amazing things, so many things I want to comment on. But one thing I do want to point out is that so many women think that as soon as they get pregnant, they need to like stop exercising, they need to take things totally easy. And really the reality is that during your pregnancy, that's the time to really start working on your fitness. That's when you should be planning your strategies. You should be working on pelvic alignment, working on posturing, connecting with your pelvic floor, integrating it with your core system. Pregnancy is like the training ground for everything that's going to happen postpartum. So really, pregnancy is an amazing opportunity to get into the best shape of your life if you haven't been exercising up until that point. So I'm a firm believer in that. I loved what you said about like with your max, your like 1RM, like dropping that to about 75-80%. That's also what I recommend too. And this is on a case-by-case basis. So really what it comes down to is how much control you have of your core system, of which the pelvic floor is a part of. So really when we talk about core system, we're talking about this cylinder of this pistonine system. So on the top you have the diaphragm, on the bottom you have the pelvic floor. They work in sync with each other. As the diaphragm comes down, the pelvic floor elongates and lengthens. As the diaphragm goes back up, pelvic floor also follows. And then you also have the multifidi muscle in the back and the transversus abdominis that wraps around. So it creates this whole cylinder that basically manages pressure. So as you're lifting, pressures increase, especially if you're someone that holds their breath and does a lot of breath holding. So what we want to make sure is that the pressures that you're creating in your body, that core system is able to handle them. So if you're trying to, use too much weight and you can't manage those pressures, then your system's going to fall apart. So you have to find that happy medium of, okay, what's the load that I can present to this core system that it can manage it properly, dissipate all those pressures so that I'm not creating dysfunction in my core system and my pelvic floor. And so that's really what we're talking about. So I think that's awesome that you're talking about decreasing your weight to about 75-80% of your 1RM and working with that load. So perfect. I don't think pregnancy is a time to really work on PRs. It's more of like a management. You still want to build, but you need to basically be monitoring and modifying. So I'll let you talk a little bit, but we'll go into.
I love that. I love that you're talking about pressure systems and breathing and stuff like that, because it's super important to me as a trainer.
Yeah.
I think people lose a lot of times what the difference is between bracing and breathing, because you can absolutely brace your core and still breathe during your lifts. And I think that's an important thing for people to learn. And I also believe that you can PR in certain ways without maxing out your weight. So
Mm.
one of the biggest ways that I added extra, like an extra challenge to my lifts, especially like squatting or anything with a barbell, was adding tempo to it. So adding a hold at the top or adding a hold at the bottom, and being able to understand what structures you're using and still continue to hold and breathe and brace without holding your breath, like no Valsalva maneuver. Like
Yes.
you are just bracing your core, you're pulling your belly in, and you're still continuing to breathe throughout, will help release a lot of that pressure. So I love that you bring the breathing aspect into it, because I think it's a huge thing for pregnancy, it's a huge thing for labor, and it's a huge thing for lifting, and it's all really connected. If you learn to do these things while you're pregnant, you are going to be so golden for your recovery. And
Yes,
so
absolutely.
for your journey back to wherever you want your body to be.
Yes, preach. Absolutely. I think something that we all need to keep in mind is that fitness is lifelong. So the reason that we're working out, we're staying fit, is because we want to be able to do all the things we want to do for a lifetime. So making sure that we're learning these proper strategies, learning proper breathing techniques, taking care of our core systems, our pelvic floor, this is going to serve us for years and years to come. And, when we have great fitness, we're able to be there for the people that we love. So we're able to be there for our kids. A healthy mom is able to pour into her kids so much more. So I think that's really important. So something that we kind of touched on that I'll just pull out again is, so basically what we're saying is that a lot of times women want to know, okay, well, I'm pregnant, so what exercises should I absolutely avoid? What exercises should I absolutely be doing? What are the rules here? And I think what it comes down to is every woman's different. So if someone has been doing CrossFit for years and years, those CrossFit exercises, they can continue with them. It's not like adding load to the system during pregnancy is going to be a hindrance or going to be unsafe. If it's something your body's used to and you have those motor patterns, then it's a safe thing for you to continue as long as your pregnancy is not high risk and you're doing the important work of monitoring and modifying. So if you're going through CrossFit and your body's giving you signs such as leaking during lifts or pressure in the vagina, maybe at the bottom of a squat, that's your body tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, this is too much load, we don't have the proper strategies, we're not managing things correctly, and that's where you need to take time to modify. And if you don't know how to modify, it's great to have people on your team who can guide you through that and tell you what to do. So I guess my question is, what sort of things have you modified, or what are your thoughts on continuing CrossFit throughout a pregnancy? Are there certain things that you had to modify in terms of your lifting, your strategies, things like that?
The first time I had to modify a lot, specifically because I did not know how to engage my peripheral muscular structure without engaging my core at the same time. So when I would do a back squat, even with a light load, if I would go below parallel, my body was still creating a lot of pressure in my hips and pelvic floor because I was unable to isolate my quads. I was unable to have that kind of mind muscle connection where I was able to push through my legs and allow some of that pressure off of my pelvis. This time is much different. I'm able to do quite a bit more, a lot heavier loads, just because I'm able to kind of fix or correct or isolate more muscles. One of the biggest things, and I know we talked about this yesterday, was having the proper warm up beforehand too. And one thing that majorly helped me was incorporating, after my first pregnancy, a warm up. So this was even before I this pregnancy, I started incorporating warm ups where I was able to feel some of those structures a little bit better. So just core bracing breathing. I would do a lot of things like hanging knee raises and stuff like that. Things where you could use your core, that it wasn't pushing your belly in a weird way. Hip extensions and stuff like that were really huge for me. I knew prior to, and I know we had also talked about this, if you know that you're going to have a kid in the next 2 years, get as in shape as you possibly can, because it's going to be one of the most helpful things for you if you want to stay fit throughout your pregnancy.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and I mean, I think having be ready to spend more time on your fitness than you did prior to being pregnant, because your warm-up should be longer. Some things that you're focusing on, it's going to take a lot more time. But that's also meditative for you and good for you. And it's only just going to add to everything, especially if it's your first baby. Like if it's your first baby and you have no other obligation and stuff, and you can take 2 hours to work out, give yourself a super nice long warm up where you feel comfortable going into whatever it is that you're doing for your workout.
Yeah, 100% agree. And that warm up, that prolonged warm up, is super important, especially to prime the core system and the pelvic floor, because these muscles are anticipatory of movement. So before you do any sort of movement, before I raise my arm, before I take a step, the pelvic floor is engaging. And if you haven't taken the time to hone that brain-body connection, if it isn't automatic in your body, it needs to be. And pregnancy is a great time to train into that system and that strategy and learn how to engage your pelvic floor as part of the core system, to integrate all those muscles together, because the core is kind of the anchor of your body. If the core is strong, if it's functioning and working together properly, then everything else that you want to do athletic wise, you're already setting yourself up for success, because you have that solid foundation and that anchor of the core system. So that is super important. So what is your prolonged warm-up? What does that actually look like? What are you doing?
So those couple things that I mentioned, those are all very specific to my warm-up. One of the things is just like I start off immediately by laying on the floor, aligning my hips. And by aligning my hips, I mean not allowing them to anteriorly tilt. So trying to lay those hips as flat on the floor as I possibly can. And then I will breathe, and I actually pull my tummy in with my hands. So you kind of pull the structures close together. I know a lot of women, if not all, basically all women, get some type of diastasis when they are pregnant, as your abs stretch out. So pulling that structure back to where it belongs, releasing my breath and bracing at the same time. So still continuing to kind of make those abs embrace as I'm releasing my breath, and then being able to pull in all the way to your diaphragm and feel what that feels like. So not allowing your shoulders to kind of come up, but pulling into your belly and taking a nice deep breath into your belly and then blowing out and bracing. I actually do that for 2 times, 10 repetitions of those nice big deep breaths like that, laying on the floor, being able to kind of feel it. I'll do hip extensions, just simple hip extensions where I'm squeezing the glute at the top, being able to feel whether or not my hips are coming up and aligning, or whether they're still severely anteriorly tilted. So you'll find towards the end of your pregnancy, your hips are going to tilt. You're going to get some type of anterior tilt, and it's actually really good for you to try to realign those hips to not be so severely tilted, because it will cause labor problems. And so that was a big one for me, was realigning the hips and stuff like that. I still do, and some people may not feel comfortable because it might hurt, or they might not have enough experience doing single leg stuff, but I still do at least walking lunges. And they say, oh, well, don't do that, you might shift your hips or something. If you are experienced, if you are an athlete, if you know to keep your hips aligned where they need to be, to have a good 90-degree angle on your knee, to keep your chest up, doing those single leg movements for me is what helped me stay most aligned during my first pregnancy. And then I also do, I do hanging knee raises because I cannot do other core stuff. So for me, being able to utilize my hip flexors and my lower core, and not having to brace up here, and you don't get the coning and stuff that you would get if you're trying to do a sit-up or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks, oh, you're going to do a sit-up, you're going to squish your baby. It's not necessarily like that. It's more because you're going to get some type of like coning or distension or something when you're doing movements like that. Another one that I do is like side planks and stuff. So you're still using your obliques and making the sides of your core strong. And it's a lot about those internal structures. I mean, so there's some weird things that I do, like we actually have a GHD machine, and I'll go flip down, which you have to obviously put the GHD machine down on your thighs. It can't be up on your hips because you have a belly in the way. But I do some back extension and stuff like that. If you have a machine, like if you go to the YMCA and you can do some back extension, fantastic, because it's another thing, like you said, it's all connected. Your spinal column, your diaphragm connects.
Tackling those multifidi muscles, those back extensors, which are part of the core system. Love it. Perfect.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a lot. I don't do every single one of those movements every warm up, but I do rotate through all of those movements for my warm ups, for my extended warm ups and stuff like that. And it's like, it's a very, very much core based and like hip alignment based when I go through those warm ups, or learning to engage my pelvic floor and that type of thing. Even just air squats are fantastic too.
Yeah. I love your warm up. I think it's phenomenal. I love that you're starting with the belly breath and really engaging with your core, because the breath is that key in the ignition that fires up the entire core system. As soon as that diaphragm descends, it starts everything going into a process. So that is perfect. I love how you're bracing with your hands. Curious, because we were talking a little bit about diastasis recti. Do you know your baseline of, because everyone has separation in their abs. So really when we're talking about diastasis, this gets a little confusing, because diastasis, the word is the word that is used for the normal process of ab separation that occurs during pregnancy. You have to have diastasis. You have to have separation of the abs at that midline, that linea alba that goes through the belly button. That's the connective tissue where the two sides of the abs come together. During pregnancy, you have to have separation because the belly is growing. You need room for the baby, you need room for your organs. So diastasis is a normal process. What gets confusing is that we also use the term diastasis to talk about the dysfunction. So at the end of a pregnancy, if the abs aren't coming back together, we're not going to be able to hold tension and to dissipate pressure in that core system. And really what's happening is it's a herniation of the abdominal muscles. So that's not good for the pressure system at all. So this is where women get a little confused and start going online to Dr. Google, and they're reading all this stuff about diastasis and getting really freaked out because they're like, oh my gosh, I have diastasis during pregnancy. Yes, of course you do. Everyone has to. And that separation's normal. But what we want to look at postpartum is if that separation is coming back together. So something that I really recommend to women before they become pregnant is to look at your baseline, your separation, your diastasis, what you are at baseline, which is your normal, and then that's your goal for you to return to as close as you can after pregnancy. So I don't know, it sounds like you had a phenomenal midwife. Did she talk about any of this with you? Were you able to find your baseline?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. So she actually, by the way, if anybody lives in the area or goes to she works out of Lewisburg, her name is Lynn Hunter, and she's absolutely amazing.
Yes, Lynn Hunter. Let's give her a shout out. I want to talk to Lynn.
Sure. She's awesome. And I was not able to have her this time around, and it made me absolutely heartbroken because she was awesome. But so I have no separation. So through my first pregnancy, you can tell during your pregnancy basically what you're going to end up with. And I do feel like probably by the end of this pregnancy, after I give birth, I will probably have about a 2-finger separation for my diastasis, which I feel like is a win. That's a win
Yeah.
for me. If
Two
you
is
don't go
actually
beyond,
average. Two is very
right.
average. So perfect. Your
So,
textbook.
um, which thank goodness, because like I don't want to be that person that comes out of it with like 3 or 4 finger diastasis trying to tell people how to do the fitness and then be but I think I'll end up with probably about a 2-figure diastasis once I got out of this. And the first time around, like I said, I had to find people to help figure out. Now that information is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people like you out there. Even 5 years ago, there were not people that were just like pelvic health specialists all over the place, or that even knew what they were talking about when it came to recovering after having a baby.
It's so true. I mean, even the world of pelvic health is so new in the United States. It's really just in the past 10 years that pelvic health specialists have, started having a voice in healthcare. So that's pretty
Which is
crazy.
awesome for literally any woman. You don't have to be pregnant. If you're not pregnant and you want to listen to this podcast and learn all the things about pelvic health, please do, because it will
Yes.
benefit you. Even if
Yes.
you're just an athlete and want to know these things, super important.
Preach,
It will
Ray.
make you
Yeah.
stronger.
Turn her up. I love it.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, and I didn't have trouble getting back to where I was the first time around. I don't know if it'll be harder this time around or not, just because, it's the second time. But I didn't even have, you couldn't even see my separation after a certain point. You would have never known that I had a kid.
Yeah.
So I think really, like I said, the extended warm-ups, harping on those structures, being able to breathe. And I know it can be annoying to have to do all of that work before you even do work, but it's really super important afterwards.
Yeah. And I mean, these are strategies and like muscle connections that all of us should be building, whether we're pregnant or not. What if, whether we ever, decide to have a child, everyone should be working on this, men and women alike. We all have pelvic floors, we all have core systems. We need to be making sure that the anchor, the core of our body, is working optimally because it affects every aspect of our life. So just a few more things that I think we should touch on with diastasis, because I get a lot of questions about diastasis. Everyone wants to know about it. It's because there has been a lot of misinformation circulating the internet about this. So everyone's concerned about diastasis. Most women, after their pregnancy, their abs will come back together. They will not have a dysfunction. They will not have that separation. Only about 1/3 of women will actually have a diastasis that needs to be rehabbed. And a lot of this has to do with genetics. So there's been studies that have shown that in 72 hours after a woman has delivered her baby, her diastasis, her separation of her abdominal muscles, will spontaneously come back together without her doing anything about it. So that's really great news. Those of us that haven't been so blessed in the genetic pool, that may not have connective tissue that is as thick or as resilient, maybe if there's a thinning of the linea alba, we might need some help to get those abdominal muscles to zipper back up so that we can maintain tension in our core system. And that's where a pelvic floor therapist would come in handy, so that you can regain that brain-body connection, learn how to create tension in that core system in order to keep your abs zipped up tight and use your core system. And then that's also where, I would want to be talking to you, Ray, and be having a client that we're working with together where they can learn the strategies with me and then they can practice them in a functional sense with you. I think that would be an awesome way to team up, because really your core system, your pelvic floor, it is integral to everything that you're doing in life, in athletics, in day-to-day stuff. Picking up your baby, same foundational strategy that you need to learn when you're doing, weighted back squats. You need to make sure that you're engaging that core system. So I think that's really important to realize, and to have a great team that you can, make sure everyone's on the same page and working on those strategies.
I agree with that 100%. And I think I love working closely with physical therapists. I wish that I could get more referrals on just a physician's end of things, because that's it's hard sometimes to get people to do that. But I've actually sent my own physical clients to a therapist first and had them refer back with things that they specifically wanted. it's not that I don't know when I need to program them. It's because those people are hands-on, physically touching you, physically figuring out what's wrong with structures, and that is their specialty. So I want to know exactly from them what specifically is your need, what is some specific exercises that you absolutely have to do that are perfect for your body, that are things that you need to do to restructure, and let me incorporate those things in a fun way, or let me incorporate those things in a way that are really going to be helpful for you in the future. I love the thought of like working back and forth, especially on the women's side of thing, with somebody like you who's a pelvic health specialist. I think it would be fantastic.
Yeah. I see like this new professional relationship just blooming over here. I don't know if everyone else can sense it, but there's something happening.
Yeah, I'm feeling something. I'm feeling something. We just became best friends.
Yeah, I think so. This is awesome. Everyone's witnessing our friendship. This is amazing. This is where it all started, everyone. Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, so you also touched on alignment, which you, during our conversation prior, you said that alignment is something that's really important to you. You're talking about like making sure the hips are aligned, making sure you're finding pelvic neutral even during your warm up as you're engaging that core breath. That's super important. So I was wondering if you could talk about, so maybe if we take, for example, like a weighted back squat or something, and kind of talk about functionally how you would cue women who are pregnant to work into that alignment at the core, the pelvis, and just like what a proper back squat form would look like, or any exercise you want to tackle.
This goes for anybody and not just women who are pregnant, but I typically always start all of my clients off sitting to a seat or sitting to a ball. The reason being that a lot of people want their chest, they like to do like the old person thing where they do this and then they feel back for where they need to go and then they sit down. So what I like to have them do is have a ball. If they're a little bit more mobile, I'll use a wall ball or something like that. If they are not quite as mobile, I use a chair, because I want them sitting straight down. That's going to be the first start of that pelvic alignment thing, because if you're reaching, first thing you're doing is tilting your pelvis.
Absolutely.
If you're sitting straight down, first thing you're doing, you're going to be engaging glute, thighs, posterior chain, everything to get it ready to sit directly down into that chair. And when you stand up, if I don't allow you to do this, you're not tilting your pelvis at all either. So I'm telling you, engage your quads and stand straight up. So that's one big thing to just sort of help them understand where their hips are in space. And then once they work into a squat where they're able to do it without a ball, without a chair, with a barbell, cueing them, I like to cue chest up. Sometimes I cue butt back, but the problem with that is that you're going to get them then again they're kind of going to anteriorly tilt their hips. If you want them to go straight down, I usually say, engage our core, chest up nice and high, and you go ahead and squat for me as low as you can go, and then correct from that point on. But I think a big thing is just being able to understand if you have a problem already or not. So learning for people to learn how to tilt their hips or pull their hips in or something like that. You see a lot of women walking around when they're pregnant like this, is because their hips are completely tilted down. So just learning how to do this and squeeze your butt and tilt your hips up is super important, because if you're going into labor like this with your hips tilted down, you're going to have a lot of problems, and it's going to be probably more painful for you, and you might end up having issues. If you know how to engage and you're able to align your hips correctly, so that you guys can obviously see I went from here to here, just pulling my butt in. If you're able to align your hips correctly, this actually puts your baby in a better place when you're giving birth. And it helps to learn that stuff, especially like if you're doing it every day for fitness, just a squat, and you learn how to keep your hips in alignment when you're squatting, you're going to know exactly what to do when you go into labor.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And also keeping your hips in alignment, finding that pelvic neutral, that also takes the kinks out of your core system. So you're going to be able to activate your core in a more optimal way if you have that proper alignment. So that's really important too. Also, I love what you were saying about squatting technique. You want to make sure you're engaging the glutes. The glutes and the core system are BFFs. We currently live in a gluteless society. Everyone is just like sitting on their glutes. They're getting so deconditioned. We need our glutes. It's the largest muscle in the body. It has so much mass. We need them. So I loved what you were saying about that. I loved your cues for, chest high. Something that just from a pelvic health physical therapist standpoint, when we were talking about diastasis, so it's really important what we were talking about before, having that prolonged warm up and really working on understanding how your body is handling that tension, making sure that you're not increasing your diastasis recti when you're doing lifts, and especially with squats. So a lot of times what I see from a therapist standpoint is people are at the squat rack, they have their load, they're coming up from their squat chest high, and what's happening is they're flaring the ribs and they're tucking their bottom. So what's happening is that the two sides of your abdominal muscles, instead of being here nice and zipped up together, they start doing this because you're flaring the ribs at the top and you're tucking your pelvis at the bottom. So now you have this separation. So if you think about like belly button right here, you're creating this separation, this diastasis at the top because you're not engaging that core system. You're letting things flare at the top and tucking at the bottom. And this is not good. We don't want that. We want everything zipped up nice and tight so that we can handle those pressures. So some cues that I would use is when you're in your warm-up, so you're laying on your back, you're doing your belly breath, check your separation. You can use your fingers to kind of check the width of your separation. Test it holding your breath, so coming up into a crunch, seeing how that separation changes when you hold your breath, and then practice doing it coming into that crunch, gauging the separation with your fingers when you blow before you go. That's a cue that I like to use. So making sure that you're exhaling as you go through the movement, seeing how that changes. And if you notice that when you hold your breath, you have more separation than when you blow before you go, then that's a strategy and a cue that you want to use during your lifting. So if you're at the bottom of a squat, making sure that you have that proper alignment, and then also making sure that you're exhaling as you rise, if that's something that you notice when you're laying on your back supine, because that'll help to bridge that separation between the fascia and zip everything up. So that's just some cues that I use. Of course, everyone's different as far as client-wise and what their body needs. But if that's something that a client notices, or if you're working with a client or I am, that's a cue that I found to be super helpful in order for them to manage that tension in their core system.
Yeah, I love that. One of the biggest cues I use is belly button to spine. So if I could attach a little string from the inside of your belly button all the way through the back of your spine, and I was sitting there and I was your personal trainer, and I could tug on that little string, that's what I would want you guys to do, is to pull that belly button right back to your spinal column.
Yes.
So yeah, we do. Yeah, and that's a big thing too, that, people don't like to be told to spend money, but if you, at least your first pregnancy or your first time around or your first time experiencing some of this stuff, hiring a good physical therapist, personal trainer, getting specialists, that's all okay. And it's definitely something that people should do. When you were starting to talk about just kind of the flaring of the upper body and stuff, we talked yesterday on the phone about some things to avoid or slow down. And one of those things was like kipping. That typically puts you in that compromised position of where your ribs are flaring, but your glutes and your lower body are tight or engaged. One way that you can combat that, if you are a trainer, you understand what's going on, is continuing to engage the core. And if you have really good shoulder mobility, learning how to open up your chest instead of using your rib cage and doing this, you're doing this.
Absolutely.
So there's a couple big things that your trainer or your therapist is going to immediately see within like 2 seconds that you don't even know that you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, everything comes at a price, right? And I think investing in your health is one of the greatest investments you can ever make. Like, you are your greatest asset in this life. So I feel like, our knowledge isn't free. We need to make a living too. But I think investing in a solid team, that's investing in yourself for a lifetime and investing in your family. So I 100% agree with that. And I love that
For
encouragement
sure.
for women.
I think that I think clients go, well, the first time they walk in and they actually are with somebody that really knows what they're doing,
Yeah.
and they walk through the door, and in like 10 seconds, like what at least 4 or 5 major things just by watching the structure of their
Yes,
body or them
absolutely.
walking or their gait or something. You're like, beep, 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 beep. You're making these little checklists
Oh
going
yeah,
down,
totally. Yeah. And then I
even
mean, you
without
probably
sun.
do
So
this
yeah,
all the time, like out in the world, you just like start watching
Mhm.
people's gaits, or you go to the gym and you start watching people's lifting techniques, and you're just like staring at random strangers like all the
Yeah.
time. You're just like, okay.
Drives my husband nuts. It drives my
Yeah.
husband nuts. We were watching a show we were watching Netflix the other day. We were watching a movie and there was this girl running away from somebody. And I was like, oh my God, she has horribly flat feet. And he was like, can we not right now?
Yeah.
I was like, that poor girl.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so true. So true. So we kind of touched on this question before, but it was asked by one of our ladies in our Core 4 group. So this question was asked by Haley. So I want to make sure that we're tackling it. Haley asked, are there any exercises to 100% avoid while pregnant?
Um, yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things is going to be like obviously crunches and stuff like that. That's pretty clear. I think that's pretty much agreed upon by all people. Now, I did do what we call ab mat sit-ups in CrossFit for an extended period of time in this pregnancy, and
Hmm.
only because you actually butterfly your feet when you do them, and you pull, if you're doing it correctly, a lot more from your lower abs and your hip flexors. So you're not like crunching up like you would if you're doing a regular sit-up. You're actually pulling a lot more from your lower body, your hips, your abs, and stuff like that.
Nice.
And you're generating momentum with your arms. So a lot of this structure up here is not really being used as much. Um, but it depends on where you were beforehand, what you
Hmm.
can handle, and again, being in a position where somebody can see or know your body or see what's causing a problem. Even if you don't want somebody, taking a video of yourself when you do something is huge. So
Yes.
like if you're doing something and you feel like, I don't know if that feels right, take a video of yourself. You'll see if
Hmm.
your hips are forward. You'll be able to see if your belly's coning. You'll be able to see any of those things going on. If you want to be your own coach, that's fine. Just watch the tape.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's a huge thing, but it's going to be mostly what your experience was, what you feel comfortable with. I'm just trying to think of like some huge major ones. If you haven't done gymnastics, don't start doing hipping pull-ups. If you haven't done, anything like that, or feel comfortable with core, stick to single dumbbell weights and stuff like that.
Hmm.
You don't have to pick up a barbell for the first time,
Yeah.
right before you decide to have a baby. There's a lot of different things that you can do. I would say stick to the things that you have heard people say you can absolutely do.
Hmm.
You can absolutely do presses. You can absolutely do squats. You can absolutely do side planks. You can absolutely do this and that. Avoid things that seem new to you. Like if you don't know what that is, then just don't even
Yeah.
touch it.
Yeah. I think
You're like,
that's
I have no
excellent
idea.
advice.
Yeah, then just don't, if it's an exercise that's brand new to you, then just don't worry about it. And if you're
Yeah.
curious about it later, then ask about it after you have the baby.
Yeah, and from a physiology standpoint, I mean, if you're trying something new, you don't have a motor strategy for that. So even if you've been working on your strategies like maintaining pelvic alignment in certain exercises that you've been doing, for a long time, your breath work, your integration of your whole core system, as soon as you try something new, you're back to ground zero. Your body doesn't have any motor pattern for using all of your strategies into this new thing. So jumping into something new, I mean, you got to be careful because you don't have the pattern for it. So you might have to take it in increments, building up to something new, because it adds a totally new challenge to your body that you are not, I mean, you just don't have the motor patterns for it yet. Not saying that you can't get them. I mean, that's how we learn everything. So yeah, and I think so also things like planks. So it used to be thought for a really long time that anyone who's pregnant should stay away from planks. And this argument was because when you're planking, you're basically putting more pressure on the linea alba, the fascia that goes between the abs, and possibly increasing your diastasis. And I think, so with most things, if as long as you have the proper strategies and you can use those strategies during an exercise, you can do anything. So planks are not something that has to be totally avoided just because they're planks, and planks a big no-no. No, like if you can maintain the tension in your core system to support your whole abdominal contents, then you can absolutely do a plank. In fact, what I find is a lot of women who are pregnant who are having a hard time creating that tension in their core system to support their pelvic floor and their abdominals, they actually find that tension easier to engage when they're in a plank position because they have this added force of gravity. So they can feel their pelvic floor and their core system more using that sense of gravity to kind of feel into and work against. So planks, I actually love planks. I'm totally okay with them, but that's something like if you're on Dr. Google, that's one of the things where they're like hard no, pregnant people should not be doing planks, and I disagree. So kind of my philosophy is that nothing is completely off the table as long as you can maintain your strategies throughout the exercise. So like as long as you can maintain your core breath, your core engagement, your pelvic alignment during any of these exercises, then they are safe and effective for you. As soon as you lose your alignment, as soon as you lose your breath, as soon as you lose that engagement, then that's the cutoff. That's where it stops. You're not ready to go beyond that because you have to keep your foundation in order to build up on it. So that's kind of my philosophy. It goes back to that whole monitor and then modify if needed. So my little 2 cents.
No, I agree with that 100%. We just had one of our clients that gave birth not that long ago, and she planked her whole entire pregnancy. That's what she used as her alternative to any kind of ab work that we had in our workouts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, and she had no issues. No issues.
Yeah,
it was fantastic. She was one of those, like really gross people that comes back like a day after having a baby and is just
oh my gosh, one of those.
Right. Yeah. So she was like, and part of that was probably because she was doing a whole lot of core stuff while she was pregnant.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge testament to the work she was putting in beforehand. Definitely.
Yeah, she was a beast.
Oh, that's awesome.
She was a beast.
Yes, love it. Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, you were talking about crunches. Yeah, so again, if I were to pick one exercise where I'm like, if we have to pick an exercise and say, don't do this while you're pregnant, crunches would probably be the one for me too, because there's really no reason to be doing crunches. They're not super functional. They are not the best functional exercise for your core. And I mean, unless you can really engage that core system, you're just putting a lot of pressure on your diastasis. So I don't think they're worthwhile. I'm not a big crunch person, in my exercise routine at all, because they're just not functional. It's much more functional and easier to engage your core with like standing exercises, sitting exercises, because we're using our core every day. So every time you open a car door, you're using your core. Every time you pick up your child, you're using your core. So those are the functional tasks that I want to build into and train the body to use strategies during those things. So not a fan of crunches.
I agree. If you're any one of my clients will know that you will never see a crunch in your life if you're one of my clients. I don't even use them for people who aren't pregnant. I don't use them at all. I feel like it puts too much pressure on the spine. I agree with that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I completely agree. Yes. I don't like crunches. I'm not doing dead bugs. So just not functional. There's no reason. Why are we doing this? Yes, 100%. Awesome. So hope that answered your question, Haley. If not, get in touch with me, girl. And let's see, I'm just going through some of the notes. Oh yeah, so something really interesting that we talked about over the phone, which was really a new concept for me. You're talking about how women can use their hormonal cycle as a way to tap into strength and align their workouts and competitions to perform optimally. Really interested in what you have to shed on that topic.
So I don't know how much research there is regarding this, and I have not looked up any sort of like I cannot refer you anywhere specifically. A lot of this is more mentorship than anything, as far as what I know, working with my own hormones and stuff like that, or working with specific athletes. There are a lot of women out there who don't even have cycles anymore, who are high level athletes. So one of the biggest things for me, I actually had been in contact with quite a few coaches who have female athletes who are at regionals or higher level for CrossFit. And they tell me all the time, especially one biggest huge one is like powerlifting or Olympic lifting too, where you're absolute, like you need to be absolutely at your strongest for when you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And typically it's pretty easy to help women understand how this works, because most women know that once your period's over, you feel like crap, like you feel weak, or once that cycle's starting and you're losing blood and stuff like that, you don't feel the best. But what happens prior to your cycle, which this is scientifically proven, tested, all of that, is that your progesterone levels is at your highest. If you are in a field like exercise science, exercise physiology, or even just like knowing anything about hormones and lifting and stuff like that, for women, higher progesterone levels means that that's going to grab onto more of that free testosterone that's in your body. And believe it or not, testosterone is extremely important for women. I could nerd out and touch on that all day, but from this perspective, at this point in time, it's going to be highest right before your period. So if you're tracking your period, or you're tracking your cycle, the couple days leading up to when you have your period, you are going to physically be the strongest because of that structure in your system. And it might only be, I can lift 2 pounds more, but 2 pounds on a lift when you're Olympic
Mm-hmm.
lifting at a meet, super important.
Yeah.
So that was one big thing that I learned. Also, once you have your period and you regain all of that blood in your system, you actually have regeneration of new red blood cells. And what that's going to do for you is help increase your cardio. So one thing that I learned is, if I'm going into a competition that is highly strength-based, or something where I know that I'm going to have to lift super heavy, I try to align the dates or with my period.
Yeah.
So I will try to align my competition with like the days leading up to my cycle. Or I will, if somebody's like, oh, we're going to do Murph, which is a very cardio intensive, high endurance, muscular endurance workout. You're probably going to be the boss girl that's going to destroy that workout, like 2 days following your cycle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an interesting concept, but believe it or not, it's something that's used widely with trainers who have athletes that are in weightlifting competitions.
Yeah. It makes sense to me. I still need to look into a bit of research on that, because now you have me really curious about it. But I mean, after hearing you talk about it, like I'm thinking into my life and my body, and I feel those things that you've talked about. Like I feel a lot stronger in those few days leading up to my period. And I'm a big runner, so now that I'm thinking about it, most of my PRs have happened when I've been in competitions that have been, like I had my period like a few days before and just finished my cycle. So like I feel that in my life, and I can sense into that in my own body. So I'm really interested on, a lot of things. It kind of takes research a while to catch up to a lot of things, especially things that we intuitively know about our own bodies. So I think that probably in the future, research will show that this is, true. And I think it's awesome that anything that you can use as an edge as an athlete is phenomenal. And this is something that is requiring you to have a greater sense and relationship with your own body. And that's a powerful thing in and of itself.
Oh,
So
for sure.
yeah, so I
Yeah,
think
there's
this
so
is
many,
really
so
interesting.
many cool things.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, our bodies are amazing. We don't give them enough credit. Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually like there's things during your period and stuff like that that are like if you just look on a hormonal level, certain things that are released and like when you do your research and stuff like that would be a cool thing to look into is some of those hormones that are released in order to tell your body to do a specific thing or like shed the inside of your uterus and stuff like that are also um, chemical signals for your muscles and stuff for to be like to either proliferate something or to inhibit something.
Hmm.
And one of those things is like proliferating muscle growth or opening up it's called an mTOR pathway in order for you to like build muscle.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like that stuff, definitely look into that kind of thing because it's very cool. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, so kind of chemical messengers for catabolic and anabolic reactions in the body. 100%. Yeah,
Perfect. I didn't know how
science.
nerdy you wanted to go with
Oh, girl, I want to go nerdy
Perfect.
all the time. Yeah, we need to have another conversation, go really deep
Yeah,
into
for
some
sure.
things. Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you want to touch on topic-wise? I feel like there's been so much information in this conversation. I've really been enjoying it. Anything else that you'd like to touch on?
I cannot think of anything off the top of
Yeah,
my head. Hopefully, people will have questions.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
hopefully, people will have questions and we'll have to revisit something or a different topic or something like that at a different time. This has
Hmm.
been awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely anyone who has questions, feel free to reach out to Rayann. Feel free to reach out to me. We would love to connect with anyone who has more questions. So, what would you say is your big takeaway? What's the message that you would like to share with our community regarding fitness and pregnancy?
Mm, I would definitely say that, like we were talking prior to, if you know that you are planning to have a child at some point in your life, try to get as fit as you can before you get there. When you get there, don't be afraid to reach out to people. If you're scared that you're going to gain weight, you're scared that you're going to be unhealthy, you're really just wanting a reason as a pregnant mother to feel special about yourself,
Yeah.
reach out to the right team. So I mean, finding yourself a good personal trainer, finding yourself a good physical therapist, a good midwife, a doctor. Don't limit yourself on those things because it's going to be the most important time in your life. And then following that, when things get crazy and you have a baby and you're stressed, remembering that to take 5 or 10 minutes, even just to breathe right, is going to be super important after you have your kid. Um, so find a good team, stay fit, stay healthy, and continue to be an awesome mom.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Absolutely. And I mean, I can't echo that enough. Everything you said is absolute truth. And it's so important for us to have a solid team in all of our lives, you know. And I think we're actually having this interview during quarantine. It's the pandemic of 2020. And I think all of us worldwide have realized how important community is because so many of us have been separated from our communities, whether it's our athletic communities, our social communities for so long. So, I mean, as humans, we're built for community, we're built for interaction, and having a solid team and community behind you who can guide you through your fitness and, you know, make you feel special about yourself and remind you of the truth of who you are. That's so important. And I think the world over
Sure.
is recognizing this now if they haven't before.
Oh,
So
heck yeah.
it's super
Find your girl
important.
squad.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Rayann. It was such a pleasure being able to discuss all these different topics with you. And my final question for you is this: where can our community find you if they want to learn more or get in contact with you?
It's easy to just go through Facebook. My name is Rayann Sprenkle on Facebook, RayannsSprenkle. If you feel like checking out some lifting videos or me just being weird, you want to get onto my Instagram. It's Sa Valkyrie. I do have some information on there, not a ton. So it would be _SA _Valkyrie, spelled just like the old Norse Valkyrie, and then underscore.
Perfect.
That's it.
And I will make sure that I type out all those things in the notes so that everyone can get a hold of that information to get in contact with you. And I know you also told me that you were a guest on another podcast. Did you want to share
Yeah.
the name of that podcast as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look into Modern Health Associates, he has like, you're gonna have to look on his website. He's like,
Okay.
has a million degrees, but but he's fantastic. I was on one of his podcasts, Ryan Motter, and I will probably have information within like the next couple of months. Like we're trying to build a website and stuff like that right now. So I can put out a little bit more information. So you guys will see, if you're on my social media or something like that, you'll see that stuff pop up.
Good, perfect. Because I want you to get all this information out. I mean, this was awesome. So yeah, great. Thank you so much. Awesome ways to get in contact with you and connect with you. And again, just thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. This was so much fun, had a blast, and thank you for the message of hope and fitness that you're giving to women worldwide. We really appreciate that. You're a huge asset to our community. So thank you so much, Rayann.
Well, ditto. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome.